Quote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." End quote. Theodore Roosevelt. That's called The Man in the Arena. You may have heard it before. All-time favorite quote of mine. My father shared that sentiment. And it is the quote that's on the first page of the book Hospitality DNA that was written by Dave Nitzel and Dave Domzalski. And I had the wonderful opportunity to sit down with Dave and Dave yesterday here in Charlotte at the Crunkleton and talk about this book. I have probably a third of the pages in this book dog-eared, underlined, asterisks, notes to self. I had a page full of sticky notes of questions I wanted to ask them when we did this interview, and I got through maybe 2/3 of them, and we spoke for an hour and a half. Y'all, this is a phenomenal book. We're going to be promoting it to our audience at Schedulefly. Highly recommend you listen to this interview and go get this book on Amazon, Hospitality DNA. There are a few books in the world of hospitality that are sort of ubiquitous. Setting the Table by Danny Meyer is one of them. I believe this will be one of those books. And I could not be more grateful that we have the opportunity at Schedulefly through this podcast to promote this book and tell this story. These guys, Dave and Dave, are authentically trying to provide value to the folks that they and we serve in the hospitality industry. And, you know, what we all agreed yesterday was none of us feels like we could do what you do. You're the people in the arena. You're the one marred by blood, sweat, and tears and striving to do something great. And we're fans of what you do. You know, we're fans of the game, and we hopefully try to do things like through these guys writing this book and like us putting out this podcast, we hopefully try to do things that are helpful and valuable to the industry that we serve and that we love. And they are genuinely in love with this industry and care about the people in this industry and want to help people in this industry any way they can. So, well, with that, I'm going to say a couple of words about our sponsor, Popmenu, and then we're going to dive into this phenomenal podcast episode. All time for me, one of the ones I'm going to remember. I mean, we've done so many great episodes. We're pushing 500, but there are a handful that you just don't forget, and you think about often, and this is one of them. So, okay, let's change gears and let's talk about Popmenu. They are a partner of ours at Schedulefly, and they are the sponsor of this podcast. And just yesterday, I interviewed somebody. After this interview, I interviewed somebody for the podcast, a customer of ours, a restaurant owner, and we talked about Popmenu. So check out the next episode with Eddie Mahoney because we talk about Popmenu. And he talked about how much he likes Popmenu and how great of a tool it is and how great they are to work with. So Popmenu is all about making your day easier and your sales bigger. They will simplify your marketing operations, bring in more guests, capture customer data for personalized remarketing to keep them coming back. With one super simple to use platform that integrates with most point of sales like Toast and Square and a number of others, Pop Menu starts with a beautifully designed, easy to update, interactive menu that transforms the guest experience online. It includes a brand new website that's optimized for search engines like Google for no additional cost, automated digital marketing, online ordering and waitlisting, and you'll never miss another call with their AI answering solution that costs as little as 47 cents an hour. And there's so much more in there, y'all. This is a great company. They have a great product, they have great customer service, and they produce great results. Hit the link in our show notes. Let them know Will from Schedulefly sent you. They'll take great care of you. They'll take great care of you if you don't say that. So, but we do have a lot of mutual customers, and those mutual customers, like Eddie that I just mentioned, are happy. And we think this is a really important product. So check it out, and check out this episode with Dave and Dave, authors of Hospitality DNA. More episodes coming soon. See ya. All right, we are recording, and we are sitting here at the Crunkleton in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is one of the places that's featured in this book that I'm looking at, Hospitality DNA, Career Journeys with Unprecedented Insights from Industry Award Winners. From the authors of The Bar Shift, Dave Nitzel and Dave Domzalski. And Dave are sitting right here with me. Thank you guys they came from out of town. Dave, one day from Atlanta, one day from Miami. Flew up to be here for this podcast. We were going to do it via Zoom a couple weeks ago. I told them that what they had produced here was worth waiting and doing it in person, and I appreciate you guys being flexible and doing that, and I think it was worth that because you've written a fantastic book, and we have a lot to talk about today. So thank you guys for being here. Just take a second and introduce yourselves if you would. Dave Nitzel, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I'm Dave Nitzel. I'm a Barmetrics franchise owner in Atlanta and also here in Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina. And my journey to writing the book essentially is I've been in the industry 10 years. I have a corporate America background, not hospitality driven, but brands we would all know and love and shop, mostly retail. And I've been in this industry for 10 years, was invited to coach in a global program with Sean Finter called Accelerate. Had access to some really special people all over the world, which inspired us to write our first book. And then COVID hit, which I have to have something to do every day or I'm not happy, which inspired us to write a second book. And we wanted to take a swipe at doing something that was meaningful, global, and featured award-winning talent. You know, a lot of conversations in our industry are about what not to do and how not to fail and that sort of thing. And we wanted to shine a light on what success looked like and make that special and celebrate it. So that's what the book's about, and that's how I got here.
All right, awesome. Dave?
I'm Dave Domzalski, and I started in physics and engineering, and about 20 years ago jumped into bars and restaurant. Been doing the industry ever since then. Started working for Barmetrics about 18 years ago. Eventually bought the franchise in Miami. So I've been coaching people there on operational and inventory control and all that stuff for the last 5-6 years. A bunch of industry award winners there, and Dave invited me to write The Bar Shift with him about 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And like he said, during COVID, we decided to start doing this research book. Very, very different from the first one. So the first one was a mind, just a mind dump, and we put all our lessons together that we knew already. And this one was a pure research project, which has been an absolute blast. Goes back to my scientific background, so I love all that stuff. And I think what we found is some interesting traits that it takes to really to excel in this industry. And we're finding in service in general, we're getting some serious feedback that any service industry type career job, this applies, which is kind of pretty cool.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize that was your background. That gets us to the science part of this. It's called Hospitality DNA, and you talk about the hospitality helix in here and the structure that makes up, these great hospitalitarians. And to me, then this is like the confluence of this great art form of hospitality and some of the science that helps us understand the underpinnings of what makes that art great. So that's interesting. I like that. So okay, well, guys, I got a lot of A lot of questions to ask you. I read this book
If you
thoroughly.
guys can see this, by the way, he has Post-it notes all throughout our book. Makes me very, very proud of what we do.
A lot of
so great.
a lot of dog ears and chicken scratch, and but I did write Post-it notes because there's a lot of things I just said, man, I need to make sure to ask them about this. So just start with just describe the overall structure of the book and why you called it Hospitality DNA, and just give us sort of a 30,000-foot view of what this book is about.
Yeah, so my inspiration initially when writing it goes back to Jim Collins' Good to Great. So that was a book that imprinted on me in my business career early on in the early 2000s. And I love the way that he looked at publicly traded companies. And with publicly traded companies, there's a glutton of information available. You can it's not so hard to figure out who's doing what financially, what the performance looks like. There really isn't that type of thing available for independent bar and restaurant owners. So structurally we were thinking, how do we figure out who is the best of the best, because it's not public information from a financial perspective, and you're not going to ask people, hey, send your books so we can verify how well you're doing, right? That's ridiculous.
Right.
But what our industry does is it has a way of celebrating success, and it's usually done through some version of awards, and a lot of those awards are peer-to-peer or they're industry-related type rewards. So we said, hey, could we take some version of Good to Great and say, what do the top 1%ers look like, and how do they behave differently? And that behavioral aspect, it led to the idea of the DNA. And you hear the comment thrown around quite a bit in our industry, they have hospitality DNA. Hear it. So that's the confluence, as you said earlier, of the idea of Good to Great. How do we identify the top 1%ers? And then what does it mean to have hospitality DNA? Is it really a thing? And that's what we set out to find. That was the research. Is this a legit thing? Can it be learned? Is it taught? How does it behave? And that was the genesis of the project.
And as we just sort of layer on top of that, the structure of the book is an interesting piece in my side, because we had written all these chapters, but they weren't in this order. This is not what the book looked like when we were done, right? So as we were looking at it and trying to figure out how should this flow, I started moving around the chapters and realized at one point you could take all these people who we'd interviewed, these 27 people, and if you treated them as one person, and in some ways they're so similar in their abilities and their skills, it sort of felt that way sometimes. Like you could shift somebody in and out of a chapter and it would still make perfect sense the way it is in terms of the stories. But if you look at it, it's almost built like the story of one person's life, going from, from, let's say, birth. It sounds a little too epic, but going from birth through gaining their knowledge, gaining their experience, building their concepts, ideas, and their execution, and finding partnerships. It follows almost a chronological order of a single pathway, but it's all these different people. So that's how the structure ended up this way, and then with the 5 helix points at the very, very end, because that was the thing that they truly all shared.
Yeah, they did. I liked those last 5 chapters that went through those 5 helix. I'm going to read these, the hospitality helix. So HELIX. H, humble nature. E, explorer's pursuit. L, lifetime of experience. I, indomitable spirit. And X is extraordinary culture with a capital X. So I'd like to, I want to, if we could, because this is the foundation of what hospitality DNA is I want to kind of go through each of these and just lay out why these are important, why humble nature is important. Some of the people you think of when you think of that, they all have all of these qualities, as you said, but some of the folks you highlighted with each of these, if we could, starting with humble nature, which I completely, like, when I first read this, or when I first saw this, I was like, okay, you guys nailed that one. Like, humility is, everybody I've come across in all the years of doing this podcast and serving customers in this space, all the ones that have been the most successful, the ones that I admire most, the ones that have sustained success for years, if not decades, that's a big part of it, humble nature.
Yeah, so I'll let Dave will chime in on this for sure too.
Oh, yeah.
Look, there's those that say that was the last trait that we discovered of the 5.
Okay.
And it's also a fun exercise, by the way, had you not heard that already, for those listening to the podcast, to think of what your 5 would have been.
Yeah.
Right. So if I had written down what I thought the 5 things would have been, they would not have matched this. So we didn't reverse engineer this. We didn't start with an answer and then figure out what the solution was. This was a pure research project, and humble nature was the last one really that we figured out. And in sharing this with some people, some people who I value their opinion very much gave a little pushback on that. Said, look, there's a lot of peacocks out there. There's a lot of people who are success, and they do a lot of let's say I call it peacocking, right?
Yeah, sure.
And it took me a while because we did a lot of consideration on it, and I thought, are we wrong on this? The more I thought about it, I thought, if you listen to them speak, they almost never say success is my fault. They're always giving credit to others.
Right.
Now, they should be proud of what they give.
Yeah.
And there is ego involved in success. There's no point in pretending that there isn't. Ego matters.
Yeah.
You should be proud of your effort. But are you still, like we talk about it in the book, we emphasize this, ego and humble nature still has a lot to do. Are you willing to listen?
Right.
So there's a lot of ego wrapped up in a humble nature. A lot of these folks are learners. They are willing to listen. They're paying attention. They learn from their staff. Are you still willing to learn from the dishwasher? Can the dishwasher still hit you with an idea that you go, I hadn't thought of that. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what these folks exhibit in terms of how they behave every day in the business. And it did take us a little while to get to that one, but we found it. And Dave had the discovery. Dave Domzalski may want to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, it was there were 2, and Itzel had the other one. But for humble nature, we were having these hours long conversations after we would interview people and write and so on, and it sort of hit, same thing as you said. I'm starting listening to every single one of these people say, it was my team. I'm lucky to have these amazing people around me, and that's how I've created the success, not just because of me. And if you pay attention, like you said, the peacocking or that ego, when that comes out, it's usually in specific moments when they're being celebrated, or there's that time that they are celebrating what they've created, which they should. They've made something amazing. But on an average day, you watch them behind a bar, you watch them with guests, and all of that ego and peacock melts away, and they just instinctively, as part of who they are, they give and serve.
Yeah.
Not because they need to, not because they're told to. It's that calling.
Yeah.
And that's where that humility and that humble nature comes into play, as far as we can see. But yeah, it was a fun one to discuss, and I had to convince him a little bit, but it didn't take long.
No.
It didn't take long.
And when I went back to Good to Great, for those that have read it and love that book, and you think about what Jim Collins found with the publicly traded companies, and the level 5 leadership, on top of that level 5 leadership was humility.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I thought, all right,
It fits.
So what it becomes is it's not just a trait of, say, hospitality, but it's a trait of great leadership.
Yeah.
And so great leadership is going to do well, whether it's in hospitality, or whether it's in the Fortune 500 America, or whether it's in a not-for-profit organization, or whatever it might be. And so when we started landing on this idea, I thought, that's right. This isn't just a characteristic necessarily of hospitality. And then specific to the industry too, if you are going to be great at this, you have to be prioritizing others before self in hospitality. You have to be in this because you love giving to others. And it's really hard to not be humble when that's your mission. Right? So it's kind of obvious when you start to really pull it back. You're like, okay, that's kind of a no-brainer. How did we not find this sooner? But, we didn't. And like I said, we didn't come in with an idea up front saying, here's the answer. So, yeah, that's how we got to humble nature.
I think of Dave Query, who founded Big Red F out in Boulder, Colorado, and nearly 30 years ago. And I've become good friends with him. He's been a customer a long time, and we've become close friends. And I remember the first time I spoke with him, interviewed him a decade ago, 12 years ago, I was saying, like, how have you been successful? How have you done this? And he kept saying, it's we. Like, I mean, he's built this amazing business, but he always defers and deflects. He's got a healthy ego. He knows he's good at what he does, but he also knows he's always learning, and he's also, you know, he understands that you can be, well, to your point, like, you can know you're good at something, but know you don't have all the answers, and know you got to continue to grow and to learn and to get better, and that's a part and parcel of having that humility. Okay, well, and it's also just a quality that it's hard not to admire people that are good, that are humble. People that are good and will constantly tell you they're good, you know, that's one thing, but are you really going to follow that person? But when you see somebody that's brilliant at something and they're, you know, they always deflect attention and they're always wanting to give and serve, that's who, I mean, you want to work for that person and follow that person.
It's a special trait.
Yeah.
Like, it's super special, and that's what we were looking for. You know, we're not looking, I mean, this was a study for excellence. It wasn't a study of average or survival and that sort of thing. And this is what excellence looks like.
Let's talk about the explorer's pursuit. I love that.
Yeah,
that's Dave's right
there. Yeah, look,
this.
I had to convince Dave of this one. Look, this was interesting. So, to give you a visual, we would do these interviews.
Let me stop. I love the fact that you guys were having to convince. I think this is awesome. So you guys really like.
Yeah. So you
had to kind of come to.
Very, very science. Like it's got to be. And I organized the book. I was like, David's got to go this way, and he's very creative, idea, big, and cultural
ideas
ideas and such.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, well, we'll get back to this when we talk about the partnership part. This is part and parcel of that conversation about partnership. Okay, cool.
Yeah, look, I love Explorer's Pursuit. I learned a ton on this. So that's another neat thing is Dave and I learned a bunch writing the book, you know. So Explorer's Pursuit looks something like this. I would do these interviews along with Dave, but early on, Dave was really busy starting a couple other new businesses on his own. So I was a little on my own early on. And so early on, I had this room just plastered with poster board paper, and I bought like 12 different Sharpies, all different color-coded Sharpies. And whenever they all had a color assigned to whatever I thought the main point was, and in orange was travel. And on every one, just travel kept coming up over and over and over again. And not the kind of travel like I take vacations kind of travel. The kind of travel that says, I lived in 5 different countries, and they tended to gravitate towards hospitality as either a calling early in their lives or as a way to sustain themselves while they were traveling and exploring. They were consuming experiences, and when you read the book, it jumps out. Like, you can hardly read a story in the book where people haven't made significant journeys and explorations in their life. And the way that seems to translate to hospitality is they cultivate these experiences, and then they bring them back to eventually a venue to then give an experience that is unique unto themselves and that's very guest forward facing.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that it's everything that they do, but it takes root in them. It's part of who they are. This searchers and explorers for experiences that they can come back as experience givers.
Yeah.
They cultivate that, convert it, and then give it back to their guests in the most creative way. Sometimes it's nothing more than a flower that they find in Sweden that then they convert into a cocktail that they're going to make. And it can be the smallest of things, but yet so impactful on a guest experience. So it's fascinating to see just the journeys of these folks. And we wanted to emphasize that for people. If you want to become like these folks, go get uncomfortable. Go travel, go to places that you're not sure about. Where, say for us, English would be a second language. I dare you to go do that.
Yeah.
Stop into places that you're not sure you should stop into, like make you, again, unsettled. Great, because all your awareness is heightened. You're consuming things at a different level when you're, say, insecure. These folks throw themselves into those scenarios, and it's great. And if you can't travel on a global type level, a lot of those experiences are available to many of us locally, and we just don't always take advantage of them. If you're in hospitality, take those opportunities to grow yourself and then take and convert that to an experience for others. And they just did this in spades, and it was just incredibly impressive. And then, Dave and I had an argument about it.
Yeah.
And, it took me a while to convert Dave into a believer on this one, but it was fun.
Dave and I, by any measure, are world travelers. I've been to Sao Paulo, I've been to Dubai, France, Paris, Mexico, Canada doesn't really count as American, China, Taiwan, so on, and his own journey around the world. And yet, these people tend to make me feel like a homebody with how much they travel.
Yeah.
But B, it's, as Dave said, how they do it. Going somewhere, and I could relate on that with one experience in Sao Paulo. Going somewhere, like Dave said, you don't speak the language. Experiencing hospitality in a pure form. They can't talk to you. You can't really communicate. So you're just going to get what they give you and how they look at you and what they bring to you. It's a completely different experience, and they do that on purpose to absorb. Whether they can speak the language there or not, that's not necessary, obviously. But they go into these trips with that lens. With the need to learn and pull in these experiences and the full intent to bring them back. Sometimes later in life they tend to have that intent before they go or as they travel, but even in the beginning of their lives, it's almost ingrained in who they are that they absorb it to give it back, whether they realize it or not from the very outset.
You know, there were so many great examples of this, and one of the ones that really stuck out with me, and am I saying his name right? Costin?
Yeah, Costin.
50 days on, 10 days off.
Isn't that crazy?
Like I aspire to that. What a great way to find balance. And, particularly in an industry where you need to do that. You need to step away sometimes just for the fact it is a full-on hard industry in a lot of ways. And if you don't give yourself that time away to find that balance, it can be challenging. And so I love the 50 on, 10 off, and I also love the idea, you just mentioned this, and you guys talked about it in the book too, if I remember correctly, was that your senses are heightened when you travel and you absorb more. I think I'd never thought of that, but it is so true.
Yeah, you're hyper aware, really. Yeah. There's survival instincts kicking in basically, but you're converting those survival instincts into business tools, which is really cool. And you mentioned Costin. Look, that his commitment to personal growth is so extraordinary, and I got to see that firsthand because he was in that coaching program. He's flying in from halfway around the world. His travel time was exceeded the amount of time he was in, say, classroom time, his learning time. 99.9% of people look at that equation and go, no way. Why in the world would I do that? The extent, and I think he's done it like 13 times now. Like, he keeps coming over for these programs because he sees the value, the personal growth he has. It helps him achieve his goals, and that's a slightly different, that's slightly off topic. That's so each chapter has a story and a message, and then we string those chapters together and say, what do all these chapters and traits have in common, which creates the helix. But that's one for Costin, which was a story of both personal growth and immense experience for him. He's a special guy.
Yeah, he is.
Really special guy.
Let's talk about lifetime of experience, the L. You mentioned, you talked a little bit about 10,000 hours in there, and just the importance of having experience in this space, and the importance of doing it long enough to realize what it's really all about, to realize whether you still really love it. I remember Scott Maitland telling me years ago, he's at Top of the Hill up in Chapel Hill, and he said, people see me on a Friday night at the end of the bar buying drinks for people, and they think like, oh, that's what being a restaurant owner is like, and this sexy thing. And he's like, that's like 0.1 percent of my time. He's like, if you knew what it takes to run a successful hospitality business, behind the scenes and all that goes on, the daily fires you're putting out and everything that comes with it, a lot of people get into it for the wrong reasons or the wrong expectations. And that's when you hear about like the failure rate in this industry, I'd love to know, and who knows what the percentage really is. You hear all this 90% and all this stuff, but I'd be super.
I can answer that for you. Okay.
I'd love to know how many of those people, like, what's the average number of years of experience they had in the industry for people that found, wind up having their own place and not making it. I bet it's not a ton. To your, well, here, lifetime experience. So let's talk about that.
Well, again, if you go back to the poster board stuff, this was easy. This was the
Yeah.
first one. Like it was
Stood
this.
out.
Yeah, it took no talent on our part to figure this one out. Every story. So the way we interviewed, let me explain the process, and
Yeah.
I'll answer the question through the process. So when we set out to do this, if you go to people, and we found this quickly, if you go to people, John Sealbinder sitting next to us, right? He's on Ready 5 to answer questions and give his opinions at some point. So John, if we go to John and say, hey, what makes you super special? You're going to get canned responses to that question. And a lot of those everyone knows what sort of the right answers are to that, and they're typically not completely honest answers because they won't brag about themselves and blah blah blah. So it's not interesting and it's not insightful. So the way we had to go through our process was tell us about your journey. You know, how'd you start in hospitality and how'd you get to where you are? And then we mostly sat back and listened and just took notes like crazy and recorded and rewatched it and all that. Well, every story damn near started out with when I was 14.
I started washing dishes.
Right.
When I was 15.
Get that all the freaking time.
Yeah, look, that's
I
it.
totally agree.
And so you bring up a very interesting point, and I think, at some point in the book about being a dream killer. When people come to me and say, hey, I want to own a bar or restaurant,
Yeah.
and they're sort of mid-career, and to your point, they think it's just going to be fun. They're doing it for them, and that's not why these award winners do it. They do it for others. So if you're not oriented to that's like maybe the most important undercurrent that we don't really call out as much as
what is your why?
What is your why?
Yeah.
And your why has to be you love to give. We talk
It's
talk
almost
about
universal.
that, but
Yeah.
yeah, if you're not there, it's not good. So again, to your point, these folks start very, very early. We had one example of someone, which was Jackson Cannon, but his dad, like his whole family, was sort of ingrained in spirits and
Yeah.
cocktails and stuff. But he went on to a music career, and then came back.
But
And
his music career was in bars.
well, in part,
And,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's what he got the experience in the bug in there in a sense. So there was a sort of a tangential lifetime
I
experience.
think
in
he
that.
says.
Well, he says in there that he realized that he played music to be
Yeah.
in the
bar.
like 'cause
Yeah.
that's where he wanted to be. That was his way. He
Yeah.
wanted to be there.
It's
Yeah.
there. It's still
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and he had a real quick acceleration, but really bumpy. You know, and when you
Yeah.
read the story, it was bumpy early, and he was fortunate to be surrounded by people that could coach him through that. And a lot of people don't have that. Well, I tell the story about sending somebody here from Atlanta,
Yeah.
trying to spook him from
Crunkleton.
opening. Yeah, send him to the Crunkleton. And
did, yeah.
and my idea was they would come here and be like, "Oh my God, I don't have that kind of stuff in me," and instead, the folks at the Crunkleton crushed so hard he decided it was the greatest night of his life and wanted to
Good job,
wanted
Dave.
to open
Good
a
job.
bar and restaurant, right? So yeah. So that was it was a little crazy, but it worked out, and we talk about that. So yeah, so that's the long answer on lifetime experience. It's kind of an easy one, but it really matters because this industry's a killer. It's tough.
And you can supplement it with mentorship and partnerships and stuff. So, and that doesn't mean you can't be successful without it. Because remember, this is the journey for getting that award-winning success, being the very top of the game.
Yeah.
So we're not saying that you don't have this, don't do it. And even still, there are people I know and I work with in Miami who don't have that, but partnered with people who do.
Right.
They had the money. They have a desire to get in the industry. They don't have necessarily the desire to give, but they know somebody who does, and they fund them, and they're either a silent partner or a little bit more removed from that part of the process, from the actual like day-to-day interaction with the guests and the team and staff and all that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You can still do it. It is going to be a lot harder, and I got to tell you, every episode of the podcast I do, the first thing I ask is,
How long?
just how and why did you get started in the hospitality industry? And I can't, I mean, so many times. Well, it's 14 washing dishes. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, and that brings up another question that I want to make sure we get to. I'm going to hold it, but I want to ask about DNA and is this hard-coded?
Mm-hmm.
Nature, nurture.
Yes, we want to
Yeah.
get to that. But before we do, let's
Yeah.
go to Indomitable Spirit.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, it's a perfect transition. This is a tough industry, and when you look, the stories in this, the thing that kept me up at night in writing this book was, can I do the stories justice? I could write the business lessons. That comes fairly naturally to me. The stories in here there's heartbreaking stories in this book. There's stories of great poverty, journeys from rags to riches. There's stories of great failures. You have to have a lot of grit and the ability to overcome all sorts of adversity and be able to do it without becoming jaded or spiteful. And the indomitable spirit is really saying, look, I can't be defeated, and I'm going to keep coming back. And this industry is built to fail. It's a little bit like baseball, where someone bad at baseball is only going to be successful 3 out of 10 times, and if you are successful 3 out of 10 times, you're going into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, right.
It's a little similar. Like you have to be built for a degree of failure. You have to be built for a certain degree of criticism. I mean, imagine pouring your heart out into something and then go seeing your
Yelp.
Google reviews and Yelp reviews, and you get crushed by some madman. So it does take it, but it was bigger than just that. I mean, these were folks. I think Kat had it in her to be in this industry and didn't speak English, which was also a big thing. Like people had a lot of these folks, because we have folks in here from Australia, India, Romania, Hong Kong, Hungary, Netherlands, Portugal. It's all over. A lot of them didn't speak English, and Kat didn't have a lot of money and was starting off, getting by, and she learned English by reading cocktail books, which is like the coolest thing I've ever heard, but it's also awesome. Kind of sad, it's awesome and sad at the same time. And I just, we love her story, and she packed up everything she had in a couple suitcases and what money she had and got on a train and headed to London, and then the story goes from there.
Yep.
You got to be made of that.
Aruba doing, I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, she's flying on private.
Instagram.
Yeah,
doing a private jet, some bartending, it's amazing, winning awards, and she's got it all.
Meenakshi in India. She had a great career going at a major, I can't remember where she was, but let's just say a major, major wholesaler, distributor. And she said, you know what, it's not what I want to do. And she was willing to put all that aside. And she had a great sort of career path going.
Yep.
Didn't care, put it aside. It was very, very, very challenging for a woman to just go to a bar alone in India, let alone own a bar.
She said, I'm going to quit this career and do the hardest thing I can possibly do. And
so the indomitable, and people are doing that in our industry every day. Indomitable spirit is alive and well in this industry, but you got to have the goods when it comes to that. If you're going to make it, and you're going to make it big.
Well, and it goes back to your comment earlier about failure rates. The 90%, by the way, that came from pardon my language, but a jackass in the 1990s got on USA Today and said that.
Yeah.
It ruined restaurateurs' abilities to get loans for a very long time. It was a very destructive thing to say.
Yeah.
Recently, Cornell and Ohio State universities came to the same conclusion. It's about 57 to 61% failure rate, which is almost identical to small businesses. They did it through two completely different research processes. One was, and I don't remember which is which, one used pure federal studies and census data, and I can't remember the other one. It was a completely different process, but very scientific. But even still, if you look at that, first off, half of you are going to fail in your first 3 years. Half. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
More than half. Sorry, 60%. More than half. The other piece is, and it's a shame this study, I can't find it anymore. It was the National Restaurant Association, but we've confirmed it as well. In our business, we do the inventory thing with Barmetrics, which is also fascinating. Lots of data to help people actually be profitable. The scarier figure, and again, you have to have this indomitable spirit to push through all this stuff, is it's about 80% of all bars and restaurants are busy breaking even, right? So you've got your first one, you think you're doing it, but you can't walk away because you don't have the money to hire a general manager. You've bought yourself a job and not a business. You've created a job for yourself. So all of that in there, and being able to, you have to figure all these things out, figure out how to overcome those things, figure out how to overcome all the other stuff, stay in it, get past those failure rates, and then deal with how do you get from busy breaking even to profitable? How do you do it? I mean, if you can, what Costin did to create a 30% profit margin in your business, if you could, which is incredible. If you don't have that in you, if you don't have that tenacity, you're going to have to bail at some point. I don't know if I could do it. I decided a long time not to. I was on that path, and I said, I don't think I have that special brand of crazy. I have a different brand of crazy. But
listen, man, we first got into this. I was like, man, I want to own a restaurant one day. And then all the interviews I've done and all the people I've talked to, I'm like, no, I don't want to own it. I want to support them and serve them because I love them, and I'm proud of them, and I think what they do is amazing, and I admire them, and I'm inspired by them. But I'm out. Okay, good. Now I want to talk about extraordinary culture.
Mm-hmm.
This, to me, like, I think this is so freaking important. I mean, they're all important. 16 years in now of doing this and seeing the folks that have done it really well for a long time, man, culture is king, queen. Like, it is so incredibly important. And I think the ones that understand that early and build that into their foundation and the DNA of their business, it is no guarantee for success, but it is like, if you don't have it, it's a high risk that you're going to be in that percentage, I think.
I want to set this one up for Dave, but I want to set it up in a specific way, because this is, like I said earlier, Dave is the culture guy. Like he's so. For years, I was working with Sean Finter in Barometrics, right hand, and we would constantly discuss culture. What is culture? How do you define it? How do you create it? Oh, culture is how people act when you're not there. Well, that's cute.
Yeah. And
it's true, sure, but what? I can't get my head around this.
Yeah.
Like, how do I make that a thing? So what happened there? And I cannot put any credit on myself for that chapter, because this guy, I'm pointing at Dave because you can't see us, was able to not only define it in a way that I think really works for our industry, right? Makes it easy to get your head around. At least me, makes it easy for me to get my head around. But also then figured out how to coach out on how do you create that in a straightforward, simple, but complex enough, because culture is a complex concept. So breaking it down in a simple manner to get to that complexity, so that you can have what you both want and need. So with that, how'd you do that, Dave?
Oh, geez. Yeah. Well, look, culture, we do have to make it sounds big. We have to make it small so people can, because the big point of the book is we want to be able to coach this out. People have to be able to replicate this. Culture can be described simply as it's what matters to the business owner the most, and what they accept and what they don't accept in the business and the day-to-day behaviors and goings-on of the staff. So there's no real magic in that, and culture is different for everybody. So there isn't one answer for what culture is. If you think about Lil at Coyote Ugly, she had a very specific culture that we talk about in the book, which is absolutely spectacular. Right down the street, you go to Death & Co. in New York City, very different culture there. And then you go to the Dead Rabbit with Jack and what he's trying to create with a 21st century Irish pub. Again, yet a different culture. What people don't take the time to do is to really define it, make it real for people, and then there has to be rewards and consequences behind it. Are you willing to hire, or are you willing to fire your best employee because they do something that's counterculture in your business? The answer for most people is no.
Yep.
The answer needs to be yes. People need to know that there's cultural consequences, and our behaviors every day matter. I told, I can't remember, somewhere, told a quick story about an organization that values respect for the individual, and they're really big on mutual respect and all this stuff.
Like 2 weeks ago.
And what had happened in one of their venues was it turned into like a spanking contest where people were just spanking the heck out of each other on shifts, and they were having fun and all that, whooping it up with it, until one of the women went home and her husband didn't think it was so funny that his wife was all marked up. But this went on for like 3 months, which is a crazy amount of time to allow something like that to go. Now that's counterculture to this company the first time it happened. The managers were there. This was every guest saw it. This was like a goings on, and it just happened. Who got fired? Nobody. Right? Nobody got fired for that. Everyone got a stern talking to, right? So when you think about enforcing a culture and having real meaningful, powerful culture, it's what do you stand for?
Yeah.
What are you willing to fight for? The beauty of it is you can really lean on it. So what does it mean if you think that culture is a bunch of mumbo jumbo? During COVID, we saw venues that thrived during COVID.
Yep.
The teams rallied around the ownership, rallied around the venue, were creative like crazy. We had people that were making more profit in COVID than pre-COVID because of the way they were able to re-engineer their business in very short order and the way people rallied around. So culture is the rock upon which you build your business. And it is, like you said, you kind of stole it's King of Kings. So it is the thing that I think matters the most. If you had to pick one of these, that, man, I have to have one of these, you want to have a great culture, which essentially means I'm surrounded by a bunch of like-minded people that are going to go to battle with and for me at all times.
I would say, just to put a little finer point on that, without the rest of these, you can be good. Without a rock solid culture, you're not even going to hit good.
Well, it's interesting because the rest, like a humble nature, explorer's pursuit, lifetime of experience, indomitable spirit, that's really about you as the owner need that. The culture is much bigger. That's our whole. It's
right.
It's how you take all of that and take who you are and how scale that and I want to talk about scaling this and the cost model. But before we do, I have to ask you about Queen's Park, because you talked about them down in Alabama and what they did in COVID and their culture and some specific things that they do. And I was fascinated by it. And I think their employee turnover rate's like 10% or something,
crazy.
15%. So just tell us about that
Queen's Park
specific.
and Lauren Mudd.
Yeah,
Mudd, one of the best nicknames of all time. Mudd.
Yeah.
I mean, why couldn't I have gotten a nickname like Mudd?
Yeah.
So Lauren Mudd are awesome. Again, I met them in that same coaching session. I remember sitting down and they were telling me about this, and I was just sort of awestruck by the extent to which they go to investing in their people. So quickly, a few things that they do is they'll take, instead of doing big bonuses and that sort of thing, they'll do team trips. They'll shut the venue down and do a 3-day weekend in New York City from Alabama and go and learn and explore, like we talked about earlier. So you have explorer's pursuit going on there. You have culture going on there. The amount of growth that they experience together as a team is special. You're building memories and bonds and friendships that transcend the business.
Yeah.
They do all sorts of things like that. Pre-COVID, they would allow folks to pick.
Yep.
So, I may say to Dave, I want you to pick a place that you want to travel to. Pick the bars. Tell me why you want to go there, what the learning experience is going to be for you, and we're going to fund that travel for you. And Dave might say, hey, I'm going to go to San Francisco and I want to hit these 4 bars and I want to meet this person and I want to drink this cocktail and do these things. And then when you come back, teach us what you learned.
The petals and the thorns.
Petals and the rose and thorns a little different, but so this was just for that individual. So they did group things, individual, and then they give away a lot of authority in the business. And look, when you give people authority, those who are worth having typically will handle it with care. If you've built the culture and you've invested people in people like they have, people will treat that authority with great care. And I think during COVID they had like no turnover, and they thrived. They started just killing it, and they weren't even open. It was just all to go. There were lines out the door to get to go stuff that they were creating. So these folks do get a little extreme when it comes to the culture side and what they do. I think, another really neat story, we're going to end up giving away the whole book. That's okay. was Jack McGarry, where he had just won Best Bar in the World, right? And in the book, he goes on to say, hey, look, I had to turn over the whole staff because I knew I didn't have what I wanted. I had just won the ultimate accolade, and I had to let everyone go because I knew that we weren't customer-facing the way that we really wanted to be. I had a lot of individual stars, but I didn't have an incredible team. That level of commitment and statement resonates forever. Look, we're writing books about it, so imagine how that resonates and feels inside the 4 walls. And plus, now you can scale.
Yep.
So now you've created an army of believers and advocates that you can open up down the street and not have to live there, because personality doesn't scale, but culture does. And that is the one big inhibitor to people that really want to scale is I don't have the people to run the place because we're so reliant on me. So culture is culture's a huge one. I think I went on a bit of a tangent. Yes, Laura, mud, the cool stuff that they do in
amazing.
Alabama,
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. People don't think aggressively enough about how to build out their culture, and it tends to still look. We had a great conversation last night over too many cocktails.
Yeah.
If we put the same vigor into, say, if we think about how important it is that we want to give a certain guest experience, give certain cocktails, foods, and that sort of thing, if we put that vigor and point it towards the staff, that's what great culture does, and that's what these great leaders do, is they put the same energy and vigor into the staff as they do what they want for the guest. And then we have a staff and a guest experience that's aligned, but too often we have a guest experience that's getting,
Super lopsided.
yeah, they're getting the majority of the hue of that effort, and then have a revolving door of staff, and then we wonder, well,
Why?
why? Well, you're not putting enough effort into
God,
the culture side.
The money that they save, if they've got 10 to 15% turnover, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars they save
Yeah.
in the cost of
Every year.
training and rehiring and all this
Every
kind of stuff.
That's right.
And
And you layer on that as well. You've got repeat business. People want that consistency. You have the same staff for 5 years. I'm going to keep coming back to your place. There's a
amen.
There's
Yeah.
a very an
Mhm.
opportunity cost involved in that as well. Not
Yeah.
just that hard, training cash.
Great culture attracts great people because great people, they understand it and they get it and they want to be a part of
Mhm.
it. They're not going to be a part of something that
Right.
doesn't have great
Inside
culture.
and out.
You guys wrote in the book, and then in a few minutes here, we're going to bring in our buddy John Seelbinder,
He's very
particularly to
patiently
talk
waiting.
about indomitable spirit, because this dude has it.
Yeah.
The most powerful thing we do as business owners is to build our culture. That underscores what we were saying, how important that is.
Mhm.
You all talk about training, trusting, and empowerment. It reminded me, I wrote this note, it reminds me of a book I read years ago called Drive by Daniel Pink. You guys familiar with that book? He talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And that lines up with training, trust, and empowerment.
Mhm.
Autonomy, mastery, and purpose,
Mhm.
giving people, the training that they need to have the autonomy to do things and not being the having trust in your team
Yeah.
to make decisions and try things and even make mistakes sometimes trying things, but giving them the ability to do that and learn from that and empowering them to do that. That lines up with that. And what Daniel Pink's book about, what Drive was about, was like, what really motivates people.
Mhm.
And it's not more money,
Yep.
I mean, you have to pay them enough and all that stuff, but it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose, like
Yeah.
giving them sending them on trips to go learn and grow and things they enjoy. That gives them purpose, like they feel like they're part of something. And so anyway, I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm just amen on that one.
Yeah, thanks.
So I want to ask you about, there's a lot I want to ask you about, but I want to ask you about the cost model that you talk about. It's on page 165. I'm going to turn to page 159. I'm going to read this quote because I've told y'all this. I love this quote. It's one I wrote literally all-time favorite quote here in the book, and it's something I find to be so incredibly motivating. So here it is. Quote: "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea." End quote. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I don't know who he is. Obviously a Frenchman.
The author of The Little Prince.
The author of The Little Prince. Teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. If they long for that, then you don't even have to tell them to build the boat, right?
Yeah.
I find that to be fascinating. And the reason I bring that up is like, that sounds great. That's hard to do. And scaling, scaling your culture. I mean, it's a really hard thing to do. You get your one place, okay, so you figure it out and you get yourself out of it so you don't have the job, and then you're and you start to grow. It gets harder and harder to scale. It's harder to scale the business, but hard to scale the culture. And one of the things that I thought, I always wonder, like, how do people do that? And I ask them a lot, how do you do that? And then you guys talk about the the acronym here, the COST model of consistency.
Which has nothing to do with cost. It's
No,
just
which doesn't.
In case
That's-
the listeners are wondering.
Yeah,
It's
consistency,
the irony.
order, self-awareness, and trust. So let's just break that down real quick. And particularly consistency, I underlined how important it is to have consistency, and that one of the reasons, and I thought y'all nailed this here, quote, one of the primary reasons people leave jobs has to do with volatility, especially emotional volatility, end quote.
Yes.
So let's talk about these 4 letters here, and then we're going to bring in John. But talk about consistency.
Me? Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So look, consistency is we all want consistency. Emotional volatility is brutal. There tends to be a little bit more of it. My background, emotional volatility would be a bit of a career death sentence in the world I come
Corporate
from.
America. Yeah. Right. Yep.
In this industry, emotional volatility is a little bit more commonplace, if that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it can be as crazy as this. It can be as crazy as I'd almost rather know that you're going to explode every time I bring you bad news than not know how you're going to react to it, because I don't know how to prepare for that conversation.
Oh, yeah. It's like the cartoon when Tom and Jerry, like you open a box and you don't know if it's going to be a present or a bomb or whatever.
Are we playing Russian roulette every time I
Yeah.
need to bring you some sort of information? I really rather know. If you're going to be a hothead, then daggone it, be a hothead every time.
At
because
least
at least
I know,
I can prepare.
I can prepare for it, and I know how to
Right.
manage it. Yeah.
So people yearn for certainty and consistency, because then they know how to plan themselves for whatever it is that they're going to be doing, or whatever we ask them to do. So that's the short strokes, is find a way to be consistent in your approach in the business so people can predict, and then that's again sort of setting your culture of here's how we behave every day in the business. What we aspire to be is a positive force and not emotionally volatile. We want to be able to be mature in our responses and our actions, allow people to fail, give people latitude to run the business. And you give the guardrails. Here's what's acceptable, right? So that's what I usually will refer to it as. I'm going to give you the parameters of how we play. Within those parameters, I'm going to give you creative license to run the business. These are my must-dos or can't-dos and that sort of thing. But within that, I love to give people creative license to run the business, and people like that. And then I tell people, and hopefully I'm a decent culture builder, that you can trust me with bad news. You can bring me bad news and know that I'm going to handle that the same way every time. I just don't expect you to, make the same mistakes over and over, of course.
Right.
But the consistency part is a big deal. And if you don't get that right, well, go ahead, Dave.
What's interesting, though, is as well, going back to the idea of many owners understanding and focusing hard on the customer-facing side, the cocktails and so on. If you go to, I'd say, an average restaurant owner and say, you need to make sure your food's consistent and your cocktails, they're like, yeah, of course I have to do that. It's a no-brainer. It's super obvious. I've never had somebody look at me, side-eyed and say, what do you mean? But they don't understand it on that other side. And it's almost as simple as, and like I said earlier, this is where Dave did a phenomenal job breaking this down. It's almost as simple as take your understanding of what you've built. If you're struggling with this, take your understanding of what you've built with your beverage program, your cocktail program, maybe your service program. Maybe you have the very consistent, we do this the same way every time. Apply that inwardly, apply that to your staff, to the employee side. And it's just as easy as that to make a culture shift, a serious culture shift. Because that's honestly the last 2 jobs I left, exactly that reason. Like literally, put a pin on it. I left it was a crazy emotional volatility, and I couldn't deal with it anymore.
Love it. Let's talk about the O and cost order.
Talent seeks out order.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. So if I'm someone who aspires, then I want to know what the ladder is that I have to climb.
Mm-hmm.
Chaotic people are attracted to chaos.
Yep.
It's that simple. So you want to have well-defined processes within your organization, which these folks tend to do. They have training programs, they have career pathing, which we don't hear discussed near enough.
Not nearly enough.
In the places that we work with, but
Career pathing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, look, if I'm good, especially now, we had a long conversation last night about staffing,
Yeah.
which would take us into a huge tangent right here. But the idea, a lot of people, it's a global sort of phenomenon right now, and I have some philosophies as to why we're struggling so mightily with staffing. Part of it is this idea of order. Like I want to know, like, I don't want to just come here and work and transact.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I here? How do I do things? What does good look like? What do I get rewarded for? What do I get bonus for? What do I get promoted for? How do I get recognized? So even if I'm not in it for a promotion, everyone likes recognition, even when they say they don't. People like to be recognized amongst their peers. What do I need to do in order to achieve that level of recognition? Chaos is none of that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have any of that, and if that sounds foreign to you, you might have a degree of chaos within your business that you don't recognize because you just look past it every day.
Yeah.
And the reality is also, the places that do that aren't having staffing issues. I would hazard to guess that Crunkleton does not have a problem getting amazing staff and keeping amazing staff. Sweet Liberty doesn't have that problem. El Patio does not have that problem in Miami. Cafe La Trova does not have that problem. People are seeking them out because, and I can speak to a much higher degree at Cafe La Trova, there is a path. There is a way to become a server, a barback, a server, a bartender, and then up to cantinero. They have a whole training path program. If you want it, here's how you do it. It's how we run our businesses. And I work on, actually, I guess we both work on meritocracy. I don't have seniority in my business. You want to succeed, you do these things at an excellent level, you prove it to me and the team, and you can proceed.
Yeah.
It's that simple. But it's very extremely consistent. I don't break that rule. I will fire for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's as important as anything else in here, but also B, makes the hiring question almost go away. And that's a big part of the conversation we were having last night is if you're having a problem, and I think the quote that this gentleman was using was, they're going to burn down the house, they're going to burn the business. Not if you have a strong culture. They won't be able to.
Right.
Hell, the staff will kick them out. You won't have to. They will eject them out of your business.
Correct. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
S, self-awareness.
This is the best leaders I've ever worked for had a high degree of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was building the perfect leader and I got to pick a trait and I said, look, this is the rock upon which we're going to build this leader from, self-awareness.
Does that
number one.
mean that you're aware of your strengths as well as your weaknesses?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. The other part is you're aware of how your behaviors affect those around you. So many people are managing more to their own emotion and their own wants and desires, and they're not contemplating deep enough, how are my behaviors affecting the organization overall?
Right.
And look, and I'm talking about, forget bars and restaurants. I dealt with this at the CEO level of Fortune 500 companies. There's a lot of people out there that are wildly successful, and they confuse a degree of success and authority with leadership. And those are very different things. There's a lot of successful people out there. There's a lot. There's a lot of people of significant authority out there. There's 4 of them right here. There's not a lot of spectacular leaders out there. Look at our politics. Look
Right.
no further, right? Which is the ultimate leadership position that just looks like
It's a dumpster fire.
it's a dumpster fire, right?
Yeah.
I don't care
All levels.
what you believe,
Yeah.
right?
No, I agree.
It's a dumpster fire. I would never allow for what's happening. Like I would fire
Every
everyone,
one of them.
right? Like this is not okay. So self-awareness is very obvious to us when we see it
Yeah.
from someone else. It's not as obvious to us when it's us. So we are always, the best leaders are always considering how are my words going to hit? And things like the things we say and the things we do are done with a certain deliberation.
Yeah.
So if I am going to, let's say I'm going to go off the rails, I'm going to show like a certain degree of emotion, I've worked that out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that with a degree
Calculated.
I've calculated
Mhm.
out. I'm going to do this because I want the shock value. I want a certain impact. I want that to resonate. We find that with great leaders understand that. And that cost model was really formed more, that particular bit in the book was really more of an excerpt from something else that I coached that I brought in from corporate America that said, look, this is what I've learned. This is what it looks like. And self-awareness.
If I may, it's something I actually struggle with. I'm not the most self-aware person. I haven't been traditionally in my life. I'm very emotional. But I've been working on it for the last, after I talked to Dave about it a few years back, I've been working on it aggressively, very aggressively, enough that I'm just self-aware that I'm not so self-aware. Really easy hack for it, if you will. Get coaches and mentors around it.
Yeah.
Give people around you permission to let you know when you've misstepped, and then course correct and accept what they're saying. I do that excessively now, and it's helped me massively. Like, I'm a good leader. I know I've been told that my entire life I am, but missing that piece, it's a big piece. It makes it so much easier to lead when you can see what you're saying and how the emotions you're portraying and every little detail. And occasionally I still misstep, and I can see it, and I'm like, oh shit, and I got to go back and I've got to course correct.
Yeah.
If you're aware in the first place, course corrections go away. You save time. The message is cleaner, more consistent, less chaos. But it is as easy now it's hard to do. I'm a really coachable person. I also know about myself. I'm very good at being coached. But if you can get to that place and say, okay, Will, I need you to help me out with this. If you see me doing X, Y, Z, or if you see something looks off, please tell me so I can go, oh, okay, got it, and mark it down in my little Rolodex of things to change in that process.
This
Excuse me.
Okay. I'm going to write a note to myself. I don't want to forget something. Let's talk about the T, trust.
If you ask people, are you trustworthy? You will get 100% response, yes. Right? Everyone views themselves as trustworthy. What most people don't consider is that trust is eroded through, a thousand little cuts.
Yeah.
So I'll say, hey, are you a trustworthy leader? Of course I am. So, all right, well, do you have anyone working here who said they couldn't work weekends, that you're working weekends? Well, sometimes we have to.
Wrong answer.
Does anyone here have a payroll issue that we haven't cleaned up that wasn't immediate?
Yeah.
Did anyone have any lingering issues? Are you late for meetings?
Yep.
Can I trust you to show up when you say you're going to be here?
Yeah.
And that's from an ownership level.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not talking about staff. I'm talking about, do owners start to take a lot of liberty with rules for thee, not for me? And those are trust erosions. Now, people of authority will tend to think of trust as much bigger things on a much higher, grander scale. I would never steal. I would never cheat. They're thinking on these grander terms, but the truth is the erosion is happening one little cut at a time. So when you go to folks and say, hey, look, can you trust? We hear it all. I mean, we're in bars and restaurants every single day. All the stuff we hear it breaks my heart sometimes. I'm like, I don't want that to be true. I like the owner, good person, doesn't understand the cascading effect of things that are happening from the management team down to the staff. And then you have turnover. And they're like, well, I don't know why everyone's leaving. Everyone sucks. No one wants to work. Well, look, here's the hard truth. No one might want to work for you. And then you have to evaluate that you have to do a real honest evaluation of what that looks like. If you're experiencing, say, extreme turnover, or if you have a real problem with employee satisfaction, your enthusiasm for the business isn't translating to the guest somehow, a lot of that can be found in some element of trust. That environment we talked about with the spankings going on, right? You'll see bleed over, for example, humble nature and self-awareness. There's bleed. Mm-hmm. If you think about trust and then, the culture, right?
Yeah.
There's the bleed there, and,
right.
and people just won't see it. They're too close to it. They don't want to see it. It's become normalized in the business, all these things. And if you want to scale, so this part is about scaling.
Yeah.
You got to get these four things right. If you have a problem with one of those four things, you're going to struggle with scaling. You can scale.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have the
far.
profitability and the other things that you want to have. You're not going to have time. You're going to get sucked into the business every minute of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the trust. I think the trust requires a little sharper look into what it really means, and it's small things. It's not the big things. I mean, if you got big trust issues, that's a whole nother
that's not what we're talking about.
That's not where
Forget
we are.
It.
Yeah.
There's a concept called the four referability habits. Not easy to say, by a guy named Dan Sullivan, and it's mostly those. It's do what you say, show up on time, finish what you start, say please and thank you is the last one. And you
So
figure out,
simple,
yeah,
but
so
so like
these are the most
so rare.
referable people on the planet, right? If you don't want
Yeah.
to sell, get referrals. That's the traits they have, and it goes right to that trust piece. And that's why, because people can trust you. Now I'm going to tell people, hey, if I know you're going to do these 4 simple things, I'll give you more business because I can trust that you're not going to make me look bad.
guys.
Same thing in business.
The last thing I want to ask you, and then I want to bring John on here, is this. I just wrote in it myself. Growth Mindset. Have you guys ever read The Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck?
I've heard of it.
She's at Stanford and wrote this book. I read it years ago about having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset is like, and we read it at our school. We talked about it, the mentality that our kids have, and you want your kids to, you don't want to say, I'm not good at math.
Right.
Like, I'm not naturally good at math. Okay. Maybe it doesn't come to you easily, but you can grow into mastering something if you choose, whatever that may be. That's a growth mindset. Fixed mindset's kind of easy. It's almost like a crutch. Like, I suck at math. Okay, I'm not going to do well in math, so I'll just accept a C. Growth mindset's, friggin', man, this is hard, but I want to be good at it, so I'm going to learn it, which is what you were just talking about. That was a growth. That's what made me think about this, like, being self-aware and being self-aware enough to know that you're not so, that's a growth, and then getting people to help you with that. That's a growth mindset. But this brings me back to the very first thing I thought of before I even got the book. When you and I met through John here at the Crunkleton 6 months ago or whatever it was, we had a great time, and you were talking about this. The idea of DNA. So I think of DNA as like this fixed thing. Like, here's your DNA, and this is it. But what the reason you wrote this book is because, just because you're not wired with all this stuff necessarily, if you do have a growth mindset and you read this book and you get mentors and you are determined that, you really want to work on your humble nature and be more adventurous and have an explorers. Like, am I right about that? Like, the DNA this doesn't all have to come just naturally to you.
Yeah.
Some of it may more than others, but with the right mindset, you can work and learn and grow yourself into this hospitality helix. Is that
right?
That's right. So look, let's use maybe an athlete analogy to take people out, because sometimes I like to get out of the industry for a minute.
Okay.
So if we use, say, an athlete analogy, and let's use a quarterback, for example, that can throw the ball 70 yards, that's a gift. That's DNA.
Yep.
Learning to be a quarterback is a skill.
Right.
Throwing the ball a million miles is a talent. So a lot of the folks that we interviewed here had immense hospitality talent. They had a natural gift for wanting to, I try not to use the word serve anymore, because it's not service, because that suggests obligation. So they have a natural desire to want to give to others freely and immensely within the industry. I think you're wired with that.
Yeah,
I think
that's
I
the
don't.
one thing.
That's tough to. That's tough to. Tough to learn to want to help and give that to others. That's hard. Can you learn it? Like, if you're really passionate about the industry, can you find ways to sort of get around that and convince yourself that that's what matters most, and maybe we have to make it a self-interest thing? We can get there. And if you can build a great business, if you have the other things and you can learn the other things, so yeah, you can teach a lot of this stuff for sure. I mean, these are examples of learners. So this book is full of learners, full of it. But they do have a certain DNA in them. I think it'd be dishonest to suggest they don't. It's obvious they do. I have an intense passion for coaching for whatever reason. Like you, I couldn't own a bar or restaurant. I'm not made of that stuff. I see it, I know it, and I'm like, man, I can't be John Seelbinder. Couldn't do it.
Right.
But damn it, do I love coaching John Seelbinder. Like, I'll drive 6 hours, right, to have the right conversation with someone, because that's my juice. So we all have certain gifts. We all have certain traits. Can we build on them? Absolutely. It's why we write the books, frankly. I mean, there's no point in writing the books if not for people to learn and grow from them. But there is absolutely a level of genetics involved in it, for sure.
All right. Yeah, so we have John Seelbinder with us now, and gosh, well, he's what brought this all together. And John has been a longtime Schedule Fly customer, a longtime friend of mine. And without question, dude, you have all of these traits. But when I think of an indomitable spirit, you come to mind. Like, you were the first person I thought of when I read that part of the hospitality helix. Without getting into all the details, you've been on the podcast before and we've shared, but you've had some significant black swan events that were outside of your control that have impacted your business, and it just seemed like a series of those for a while. And you and I actually haven't talked in a while. It's been a little bit, so thanks for being here, first of all, man.
Oh, man, thanks for having me, first and foremost, and congratulations to you guys on the book.
Thank you.
I know it was a big thing. I talked to Dave on the regular about it, and then Will, big thanks to you, man. Just always tripling down on taking care of all of us in the business. And like I said, I'm loving your whiteboard posts now. I like those. Those are looking good.
Good.
I left you a comment last night. You might see it today. So.
Good. Yeah, I'm not too active on the social media stuff, but I do. That's our forum for putting those out there now. I'm just. What's on your mind, man? Like, have you had a chance to read the book yet?
Yeah, I did. Doubled back and forth with the audio and the reading.
Really?
Referenced back. I was on a road trip last couple of days, back and forth across the state. So I got to listen to that. I actually called Kostin yesterday via WhatsApp. We did a little video chat. He's my brother, my European brother. Him and his brother both. So we had a nice chat yesterday. But I dove into it a little bit, and it's one of those educational books, right? Like I almost feel like I got to have a notepad side by side, or I'm not reading it right, right? So, I dove into things pretty good, and I'm a math guy, so when you start breaking things down by its building blocks, it starts to talk to me a little bit. So.
Yeah.
What is remind me the backstory of how you guys are connected initially?
Okay, so 2013, I hired an operator out of Chicago, and he had asked about using Barmetrics as a inventory control solution, and being an engineer, I thought I had it figured out. I had a piece of software, and I'd hired an intern to do inventory for me, and I'd always been kind of stickler to the science, the bar science, and I said to him, I said, I've worked with the other inventory company. We'll leave them out of this, but and I didn't have a great experience. I didn't feel like the culture was there. I didn't, it was one of those, like, are we trying to catch our employees stealing kind of mentalities, right? Different from what I later learned was the Barmetrics mentality, and what I later learned from spending time with Sean, the founder, and our business coach, that Barmetrics was set up differently. The franchisee at the time was a guy named Ryan out of Maryland, an incredible guy. His son ended up getting brain cancer, and that's when Dave bought the franchise, and that's where Dave Nitzel and I first met, and I was a little bit not excited about it because I had built these dashboards and dove in late at night at 2 and 3 in the morning, and again, having an engineering brain and being a slave to the building blocks of things, I would set up and send emails to Ryan, and we would work through this, and we would bang out these little dashboards and how do I read variance against my cost of goods and stuff like that. So, enter Dave, and I was like, I don't know, man, this is a new guy. I don't know about this guy. And then, of course, over time, we got closer and closer. And Dave D, this is, I've heard plenty about you, and this is our first in-person meeting,
Yep.
So with the Barmetrics side of things, I do have a funny story in how I got involved with this circle of friends and people I've had the very fortunate honor of becoming close with over the last however many 6 or 7 years. Dave said, you got to get up to Annapolis to this conference. You got to meet Sean, you got to meet the founder, you got to do the thing. And I, in my head, I'm walking away, and I'm like, why the hell am I gonna? I've got some things going on in my business. Why am I gonna go meet the guy that taught you how to count bottles, right? And we walked into this, and I did, of course, and it was walked into this room, and one of the first things I asked Dave, and I didn't really quite grasp it. I pulled into Annapolis, Maryland, which is not the hotbed of food and beverage, like high-end concepts, and but it's got its own culture, right? Like it stays busy all the time. It's a tourism-driven culture, and there are more bars and restaurants per capita than I could ever imagine, right? So, so I walk into this room and I said, David, there's some people that maybe I should get to know before the weekend's over. He's like, I don't know. I'll ask, And so he goes, I'll ask, and then I turn around. By a couple days later, and Dave's coming over. He's like, you might want to meet this person. I'm like, I've already done that, brother. You're in this room with all these powerhouses. He's like, I didn't know, which is a great story that Dave tells. His first time coaching all these people, these world renowned, gods of our industry, people that have written the books and won the awards and everything else, And here's the auto parts guy coaching these guys along, right? So, by the end of that weekend, I was taking notes. I still have my first set of notes, and I could sit here and go through those, and we'd be here till tomorrow. But, that's kind of how that continued to evolve. But then, of course, Dave and I have sat in a car and drove back and forth from Charlotte and talked about everything under the moon, and I think, Nitzel here, he's very humble about his past, and in this world, I've had to drill him a little bit here and there and say, open up to me about your previous life, because I think one of the most powerful things that I read yesterday was the first chapter there where you guys talk about, the lack of resources and education and, various other, laundry list of things that we don't have or utilize in this business as a majority, as a large majority. There's a few of us that have been fortunate enough, myself, to stumble in a room of people that are committed to the science and the culture. I could touch on that a little more later, but whether it's spoken or written. And I think some of the great conversations I've had with business people, and Dave included, are business is business in so many ways, right? Like, and there are such great correlations. The real estate correlation you gave me once, the guy that had to go renegotiate every lease in the country for his company, that'd be Dave Nitzel, right? And but what is very different is, again, in the first chapter, this is, in my opinion, again, one of the most unique industries in the world. I can say I don't know that there's anything else quite like it. I was thinking of maybe one the other day, and I can't remember what it is. I mean, there's some really tough ones. Being a college coach is tough. You get fired if you don't win. And there's a correlation there. I guess we lose if we don't produce, and we're not profitable. But it's always on. It doesn't shut off at night. It's always going. You never know when you're going to get that call at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m, which you hope you don't get. In certain cities, I think there is a more legitimate hospitality-driven culture. I think reading August forward and just talking about how many of us, or how many people where their families were not happy that they had committed to the hospitality business. And I will say, too, I can echo that in the last 6-7 years, I think there has been a giant shift in, even not just hospitality. I think a lot of people have looked at maybe food and beverage directors or hotels or bigger restaurant groups as a career, but working in a bar as being a career. And there's some folks that we've grown close to that wholeheartedly believe that. Said Moses, is completely committed to that. But I will say, outside of that deliberate statement, it's just felt like it's a little more acceptable, especially in professional hospitality cities. I think that some of us in these smaller markets still have a hard time convincing people a little bit that this doesn't have to be a stop-off gig. I beat my way through an engineering degree at NC State, but it lasted a lot longer because I fell in love with bartending, right? It's hard to juggle that when you're living this rock star lifestyle, right? Which I thought I was at the time. Best bartender in the Triangle, right? That's a big award. So I wherever I rambled on from there, but coming out of the gate in the beginning of the book, there were certain things that echoed heavily, and one of those is, not until I told somebody the other day, I said, listen, I said, I can tell you something now, and I can only tell you from experience. This is a 23 or 24-year-old employee. I said, the time when my life changed, when things changed for me, was when I embraced that you're exactly where you are, but because you're here, this is where you're supposed to be. And I just dove headfirst into hospitality, not like, when I get my real job, turns out I was making, real money to pay my real bills, and that, there was a reason that I was addicted to it and fell in love with it. My journey and my career path were completely different, almost a complete opposite of when I first, got my first restaurant and bar job. My hospitality started at a very young age as well, but when and I think that's life in general, right? When you double and triple down on yourself at the moment that you're in, and commit to where you are, even if it's a journey out going a different direction of where you are, you still got to embrace the moment that you're in. I mean, the last job I had was the worst job I had, but I committed to sticking with it and not just tucking tail until I had that next vine in hand. And I was so used to just screw this onto the next, prior to that. So again, I doubled down in it, and it's been my life. I could say I was or did or whatever past stories I had, but this has been my life for 24 years at this point. I mean, this is what I've done. This is it. So whether or not I want to, look back and say what if, or maybe I did it different this way or that. And I've opened a lot of concepts, in the last 11 years of being an owner, and I feel, fortunate to have done that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the three of us sit here, we're like a fan of you, and we're a fan of your peers. We all three, I think, have agreed we couldn't do this, but we're students of the game. You're in the game. You're in the arena. That's the very first page of this book is The Man in the Arena, a quote by Theodore Roosevelt, one of my favorite quotes of all time. And if you don't know that quote, look it up. It's a little too long to read right now, but you're the man in the arena, and you for all these years you've been doing something that's it's hard, but it's important, and it's amazing, and it's rewarding, and it's challenging. And one of the things Angus talks about in the foreword to the book is what hospitality is. It's about how do we make you feel? How do you make people feel? And you want to make people feel comfortable and welcome and important and understood. And I've learned a lot over the years of interviewing you, John, and your peers, and talking to you, whether it's on a podcast or when we've hung out or whatever. Like, I've learned I couldn't do it, but I've learned that you can take, my overarching point here is you can take, I mean, this book, it reminds me a little bit of this famous book, Setting the Table, that Danny Meyer wrote, that people outside of hospitality read. Like, I feel like this book is a good roadmap for in any business. I mean, if you apply all of this, I don't care what kind of business you run, if you have that foundation and that helix, and you work on those things, and you provide hospitality to the people you serve, whatever your business is, it's amazing. I'm saying that because, like, what I've learned from you and your peers, and what I try to absorb when I do podcasts as a student of the game, as a fan of the game, is like we try to provide hospitality to our customers. I mean, we have a software business, but like, I've learned so much about how to take care of customers from y'all. And I think that if you take what you have here into any profession, it's going to work. It's going to help you build a successful business. But boy, yes, being a college coach is hard, sure, but you're probably going to walk away with millions of dollars. In this business, it's like, it is hard, and it is hard every day, and you do need to be in it a long time to understand what it's all about and know, is that right for me or is it not? It's not for me personally. It's not for you guys. It is for you, and you've done it a long time, and because you've got that wiring to want to provide this experience of making people feel comfortable and welcome and important and understood. And it is something that I think we finally started to realize during COVID, that hospitality is an essential industry. Hospitality workers are essential people when we need them, and when they were all shut down, when all of you had to close your doors, I mean, I've been beating this drum for a long time, and friends and family are like, Will, you and yeah, whatever, and then they're like, wow, holy crap! Like if our favorite restaurants are closed, like that's a problem. I mean, it like the whole essence of a city or a town changes for the worse in a really negative way when all the good independent restaurants and hospitality businesses go. Like that changes the game. Like they're a key element to what makes a city or a town great.
Very true.
So I have profound respect for what you do and what your peers do. I have profound respect for people that are in this industry and the amount of work it takes. I mean, even my daughter's now been a hostess for the last couple months at a restaurant. Just a story she comes home and tells about. It's tough, and but it's amazing. It's a long way to get to something that I wanted to make sure to address today, and I wanted to bring it up as one of the last things we talked about, because to me it was like what really like the story that really hit me hardest in this book is Giving Kitchen. I thought that what they're doing at Giving Kitchen is fantastic. Jen and I spoke yesterday. She's going to be on the podcast, but I'll stop and take a sip of my coffee here, and if one of you guys wants to talk about Giving Kitchen and why that's in here, and you all know her, and what they're doing, and what they're doing is so important, it kind of gives me chills. But anyway, wouldn't you guys please talk about Jen and her story at Giving Kitchen?
There.
Yeah, it really. Oh man, look, I'll try to answer the question in
concisely
the best way I can. So, I'm not an author, right? Or I'm not a writer. I'm an author. So, I can write business principles. Comes fairly natural to me. The responsibility that comes with writing someone's personal story and doing that justice, that's another level of for me. Like, can I do this? When that story is also mired in tragedy, it then becomes another level of and how can I do this story justice? The amount of times I rewrote that story and the amount of sleep I lost in asking myself, was it good enough? It's still not good enough, to be completely candid. In my mind, I can't do that story complete justice that it deserves as a writer. But the business lessons that come out of it are significant. Her story is unbelievable. What they do for the industry is beautiful. So essentially what they do, their mission is to help people in the hospitality service sector when they need help. You need help paying bills, you're down and out, right? They have funding, a certain amount of funding, and obviously they're a 501c3, so they rely on donations and the like, and they are a huge aid to the industry. It's a beautiful thing. The story is a bit born of tragedy, which I won't go into the whole story. That's something I guess you get to read when you buy the book.
Yeah.
But she's a wonderful person on a beautiful mission. They're looking to expand across the U.S. So right now they have a heavy presence in Georgia and Tennessee, and I think a few other markets.
They have an office here now.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, she's going to come up, and we're going to do it in person because she's got her Ariel, her field associate here in Charlotte.
Yeah. So I encourage everyone, when Jen comes on, give that a real listen. She's a special person with an incredible mission for the industry. I won't steal her thunder. We'll let her tell that part of the story. But you asked why is it in the book? Like there's two stories in the book in that particular chapter, and the way the book is wired is the first setup, 17, 18 chapters are fairly specific, and this was one on the power of giving is what that chapter is about, and we emphasize a couple incredible stories, both of them tough.
Stephanie,
yeah. And the idea is, again, it's a reoccurring theme that we saw in these high-performing, award-winning individuals is they give back. Mm-hmm. And they give back, I think, for two reasons. One is the obvious. They want to help people in need, and they want to contribute to society. The other thing in giving back, though, is you get a lot of juice out of that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I get more juice out of listening to John talk about in any way that I helped him, right? If there's just a little bit of, hey man, Dave just said the right thing at the right time accidentally once and it helped me. Look, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to run a marathon after that. And I think that's natural, by the way. It's not necessarily unique to hospitality that we get from giving. I think that's a human,
it's hardwired
that's a human
into
trait.
into our being.
But the idea for hospitality is, look, get busy doing it, because we need that. With all the stress and pressure that comes along with success and failure in this industry, we need those moments, maybe more than anyone, to sort of refuel the soul, to re-energize the soul, and that stuff is incredibly powerful. So, and there's lots. I mean, Ivy Mix is in the book, and what she does is amazing. There's just endless examples of these folks giving back, and that can't be a coincidence. And I think it is somewhat common in our industry. But again, if you want to get to that top 1%, or if you want to know what the best of the best are doing, it's programmed into how they operate.
Yeah.
They do it on a regular basis. It's systematized.
Yeah.
They have a cause or a thing or whatever, and you talk to them, and go, we do this every year, we do that every year, I give to this cause, I give to this organization, we donate food, whatever it is, and you get so much out of that. And that's just a good message for humanity, not just hospitality, but I do think hospitality needs that, maybe a little more than others, because the stressful nature of what we do, or what you do.
Amen. Well, guys, we could go on I've got so many more questions, but
there's a lot to unpack there.
We're about an hour and a half in. This has been a wonderful conversation. John Seelbinder, you're at the center of a lot of great things and bringing people together. We're here because you brought Dave Nitzel and I and you together to this bar here at the Crunkleton back, I don't know. Gosh, it was like September, October.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it was into last year.
Yeah.
And
it's kind of always been my thing, man. They call it the SEAL circle of friends.
You're a connector, man. You are a connector.
Nobody really wants to meet me. I just want to introduce everybody else, right?
Yeah. That's the humble nature.
Yeah.
That's the humble nature. Well, look, go listen. If you're listening to this, go listen to John's been on the podcast, 2 or 3 times
2 or 3 times. We get to sit down and talk, Will. I mean, one of the coolest things is, and we'll talk, I know you talk about Schedule Fly, and you just did a post the other day, and this is something for anybody to hear, but they do it with a staff of 5.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I sent an email in after working with you guys for a while, right? And I said, man, I just want to thank you guys. You got a couple things figured out, and it really makes sense to me. And like a day later, I get a call from Will, and he's like, hey, John, and I was like, holy cow, this is great, and we did a podcast, and then it turns out I was living in Charlotte the last couple of years for half the week, and Will and I were down the street from each other, so I guess even during COVID, we got to sit at Whole Foods and have a coffee outside.
We were out there at Fresh Market down there and right near your place,
fighting the leaf blowers.
And
the loud cars driving by.
So, we were.
So it's been great. I always enjoy spending time and you have such an incredible, we all meet people in this industry, but Will travels the country on the regs, meeting all these very high-end badass operators that we see on the website with their logos all the time and spread all over, so that's pretty cool. So if anybody gets a chance, listen to the podcast a little more often. There's some great people on there.
Well, listen to John's episodes. You do have an indomitable spirit, man. Like that is, you've proven that multiple times, and here you are still rocking. And well, look, Dave and I are all, as I said, we're students of the game. We're fans. We know we don't want to do what you do, but we want to support what you do, and in some way that we're each able to hopefully help people that we serve in this industry, because we have a lot of respect for what y'all do. So thank you for what you do.
No, you guys do it, man. You do the deal. That's not just a talk. You walk the walk.
Well, guys, thank you for writing the book. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about it with you. I hope we'll do it again. There's a lot more still to unpack here, but
is there a round 2 on this podcast?
It's
kind of got to. You got to break this up into a couple of
things.
A lot of stories to tell here, right?
Yeah, I think we'll maybe a few months into the summer, something like that. We find out what we've all learned, and I'm going to share this with a lot of people, and you all will get a lot of feedback, and we can kind of, I'd love to pick up the conversation and just.
That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, twisting my arm.
We got cocktails and chats coming up at the Merchant, right? Like,
yeah, we have to schedule that. I
got
know.
our cocktails and chats over the book coming up.
Yeah.
Will, you'll have to be there.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm in.
Stay at my house. Wake up with a baby.
I'm in, man. I'm not in for that. I've done that several times now.
Yeah, we'll get a date for that. Let's go. And I'd love to come back, Will. I think what you do is great. You ooze authenticity, and I love how much you care about the industry. That's our role.
Yep.
And our job is to support the industry, and we're all in for that.
That's why we wrote this book. Right? We're trying to help. That's all we want to do. So, and you're right along with that.
I'm going to recommend the heck out of this book. It's really a fantastic book, guys. I mean, you've really done an amazing piece of work here, and I'm going to try to get this into as many hands as we can influence through this podcast and through Schedulefly, because it's a piece of work, or a great piece of work. It's a great investment of a small amount of money and time, and I mean, clearly, like y'all see, I've got. I kept my sticky notebook with me. I have pages and pages and pages, dog-eared and notes, and so this is not a one-time thing. This is it's a good roadmap.
Hey, looking at that's a dream come true for someone who wrote it, and I guess I should say, right, available on Amazon.
Available on Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Audiobook, Kindle, paperback, hardcover. So
That's the four.
Whatever you fancy, the hardcover is a bit of a beauty.
It's beauty.
I do like the hardcover. But we hired a guy from Charlotte, as it were, to do the audiobook because we wanted to make sure it was done right.
He's a very nice voice.
I wasn't sure I could.
Much
Got a
nicer
very
than
unique name too.
Huh?
Yeah.
Nice
doesn't
ring
it?
to it.
Yeah. It's cool.
Definitely. I mean, it's a 3-year. It was a 3-year endeavor for us. So it makes us feel really good to hear you say that. Somebody who's as invested in the industry as you are, who knows as much as you do, who's done your own research and
written your own books,
talk to people. To hear you say that makes me feel particularly warm and fuzzy.
Good.
Try not to tear up, because this is our effort to give back. Like, we didn't do this to become millionaire. You don't become a millionaire for writing a book. We truly, honestly want to help people, and I think it does us a great honor to hear you say what you think about the book.
It comes through in the book and through talking to you guys. So thank you all. Hospitality DNA. Go to Amazon, buy this book, check it out. More episodes coming soon. That is a wrap. See ya.
See ya.
Hey, y'all, before you sign out on this episode, a couple of quick things. Number one, if you listen to us on iTunes, if you could give us a star rating and a comment, it would help so much. Same thing if you're on Spotify, follow us, or any platform that you're on, if you would just do whatever their rating or follow options are. What that does is it tells the algorithms that this content is good and meaningful and valuable, and it'll tell them to put it in front of more people. So thank you for doing that. If you take the second to do that, that'd be so awesome. And also, if your restaurant is either using Excel or you're using some software that's expensive and has a lot of bells and whistles you don't need, or maybe doesn't have great customer service, we'd love to take care of you at Schedulefly. Simple, easy restaurant employee scheduling software, legendary customer service, 30-day free trial, schedulefly.com. My cell phone number's on the trial sign-up page. Thank you for listening. See ya.